And indeed, Stephen Flynn is widely regarded as one of the most able politicians in the SNP, and many would say in the Westminster Parliament as well. He was here in the studio just moments ago, and I put it to him that whilst a lot of nice things have been said about Humza Yousaf, he really wasn't very good at politics.
Look, I'll add to those nice things, if I may, Andrew, because he's a really good guy who's acted with integrity and compassion throughout his time in office. He's had to deal with some huge difficulties, some of which have been completely out with his control. And, you know, on some of the biggest issues, child poverty, 100,000 less kids, fewer kids in Scotland in poverty as a result of the budget that he passed. And when it comes to the big foreign policy issues, the ceasefire in Gaza, it was Humza Yousaf who called for that first. He was a leader on these aisles, and I'm just very sorry it's come to this.
Can I ask about why it's come to this? Because one of the ideas going around is that the Scottish Greens pursued, as it were, more virtuous, more socially radical policies, perhaps, and pushed those onto the SNP to the extent that the kind of core of Scottish public opinion wasn't quite there.
Yeah, and I think, I'm one of the people who's quite happy that the Butte House Agreement was brought to a conclusion. There's disagreements and discussion about how that was done, but I think the core instinct of the First Minister to do that was right, because in order to be successful in politics, your priorities have to align with those of the public. And whether anyone wants to dispute it or otherwise, the reality is that we have not been talking about things and acting upon things which have been solely aligned with the priorities of the public for some time now, and that needed to end, and Humza decided to end that.
So let's be specific about what we're talking about. Some of the criticisms over gender rights after the publication of the Cass report, the ending of jury trials in rape cases, the ending of the non-proven verdict, which has been a historic thing in Scottish courts, aspects of the bottle return scheme. Is this the kind of thing we're talking about?
Highly protected marine areas.
Hate crime bill?
I wouldn't necessarily, I'm a lot more relaxed when it comes to the GRR than others within.
So gender recognition.
Yeah, within the party, and I think it's important to reflect upon the fact that all parties in the Scottish Parliament, individuals from all parties, backed that. But it's quite clear that when it comes to some of the economic aspects. So like the cost of living crisis, the Scottish Government decided to freeze council tax. 70% of the population backed that. Yeah, we're having to deal with criticism from the Greens about the decision that we've made when people don't have money in their pockets. That's a pretty bitter pill to swallow.
And the Greens are at about 1% in the polls, I think, overall.
Are they that high? Okay. I wasn't aware.
So there's a question of the tail and the dog there.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's obviously been some strong relationships built up, and the reality is that moving forward, people are going to have to act in a grown-up manner in a parliament with a minority government. They're going to have to come forward with proposals, costed proposals, to take things forward. We all know that. Humza knew that when he took the decision that he did. As I say, I think it was the right decision in the interests of the public who want their government to be acting on the economy, on jobs, on the NHS, and on the cost of living.
Relations between yourselves as a party and Alba, the smaller independence party. Alex Salmond said this morning that Humza had been on the phone to him at 7 a.m. trying to negotiate a deal to keep him in power.
Well, I've not heard that. This is the first I've heard that. I'm surprised Alex Salmond's still up at 7 o'clock in the morning. I thought he was retired. Obviously not. Like, I don't know if that happened or otherwise. I mean, Alex has enjoyed his time in the spotlight for the last couple of days. I think he's probably overplayed his hand and is maybe a little bit sorry about having done so, but I don't know if that happened or otherwise.
Because there is in all of this still an argument about how you get to the independence referendum. Alex Salmond wants you to be much more aggressive as a party, and that's one of the things he was trying to suggest to Humza Yousaf.
Yeah. So the Alba party, obviously Alex's party, are very strong with the language, but when it comes to proposals, I've not seen anything which would pass muster with the Scottish people yet. If anyone in Holyrood, if anyone in Scottish public society wants to come forward with an easy roadmap, I'd be the first person to sit down and listen to it.
And is the problem still that for the Scottish Parliament to simply declare it had the right to have a referendum does not pass the legal standing given the Constitutional Act, and therefore would not be an acceptable way to get independence?
Yes, of course, as I understand it. And, we can't operate in a vacuum where we can pretend that the rest of the world is not watching. Because in order to become independent, you need to make sure that you take others with you, both those people in Scotland who disagree with you, but also the wider world who of course would have to endorse it, and particularly the likes of the EU.
Now, there's a sort of drumbeat going on at the moment in the background about who might take over. And John Swinney, the much respected former deputy leader, deputy first minister and finance minister, is being mentioned at all. Your predecessor, Ian Blackford, mentioned his name. I just wondered what you thought about that as a potential candidate.
Yeah, and that drumbeat will continue with me because these are serious times. Serious times require serious politics and serious politicians. They don't come much more serious, better or more experienced than John Swinney. And I sincerely hope that he will listen to the growing number of people who are suggesting that he throws his name into the hat.
Now, we've been talking to LBC listeners during the course of the day, and I have to say we have had a few people calling in and saying the obvious person to take over is somebody called Stephen Flynn. Do you think that you're an MP at Westminster? Do you think somebody who's based at Westminster rather than Holyrood is now simply in the wrong parliament? It's not possible for a Scottish nationalist based at Westminster to be leader of the party anymore.
Well, that's firstly very nice to hear, and I'm glad that my family have been phoning into to LBC all day. But look, I think it's important, Andrew, and I said this last year when Nicola Sturgeon stood down, that the party leader is in Edinburgh so that they have the ability to become First Minister. And look, I was never going to be in the running for this, not just because of that, but because as a politician, I also know and this is very unusual for a Westminster politician to say, I know the limits of my own abilities and my own experiences, and I wouldn't be ready to take on a role like that, I'm afraid.
Well, that's very, very interesting. You've done very, very well here. I mean, you've had big high profile at Westminster, but you wouldn't go back to the right Parliament.
I would say I think most Scottish MPs would love to go back to Holyrood because that's our home. But let's make sure that when we do so, nobody replaces us in Westminster because we're independent.
So you're still a young guy. You're not ruling it out forever.
No. I mean, I'm only 35. I mean, this will come as a huge shock to listeners and to viewers. But I've got very many years ahead of me. I've got a lot of things to experience, to learn from others. And once I've done that, I'll maybe consider doing something like this. But for now, we have someone who is unrivaled in their experience, and hopefully John comes to the fore.
Finally, we've had a lot of conversation over the last day, really, about the possibility of these votes of confidence going the wrong way and Scotland being thrown into an early general election. What's your suspicion? What's your take?
Yeah, I think those arguments are perhaps being posited by the Labour Party, who are quite keen to pretend that you're not in a position in the Holyrood to change First Minister, when, of course, in Wales, they've just changed First Minister. Mark Drakeford was replaced by Vaughan Gethin, who appears to have his coat on a sugary peg at the moment. So they may well be in a similar situation to us very shortly.
I'm just trying to remember who kept attacking the Tories for changing leaders without elections, and I think it was somebody called Nicola Sturgeon. Was very, very forceful on that subject in the past.
And it may well have been me in the not too distant past either, given the chaos we've had in Westminster. But look, as you know fine well, and your listeners would know, you don't elect a Prime Minister in Westminster. In the Scottish Parliament, there'll be a vote amongst MSPs to see who takes on the role, and I would hope that should he be encouraged to take on the role, that John would be able to command support within Holyrood itself.